switching off my webcam. Don't worry. I just wanted to put a face to a name, as it were. Yeah, let's get started. So this session, as the title entails, is about change and the difficulties that go with change. iMoot and conferences in general tend to be full of enthusiastic people. Now I'm enthusiastic myself, but I've been bitten a few times for being too enthusiastic. So I just wanted to share some of the things that have happened to me, perhaps some of the things that I didn't really plan for and maybe could not have planned for, maybe could have. So I just want to share some of the things with you. So this session is not about how to do change, as it were. There are great books that deal with that. This is really just my take on it and from my experience. So maybe you'll recognize yourself in some of what I say. Maybe you'll think that I'm wrong. Maybe you'll think something completely different. But hopefully you'll take a thing or two of that. So there are a couple of things at the bottom there of the slide if you want to get in touch, either through Twitter or on my website. The quote, by the way, if there is no struggle, there's no progress, is by Frederic Douglass. If you're interested in American history, this is quite an interesting quote. So a bit about me. I think it's important to put this in context because this is kind of an opinion piece. So it would be a good idea if I gave you a bit of my background so you understand where I'm coming from. As you guys, I wear a variety of hats. I'm a father of two. I'm a teacher, but I'm also a student. I'm currently studying for a master's in educational technology. I'm thinking maybe of doing a PhD later on. I really enjoyed that part of my life. I've been an avid Moodle user and admin for the last 10 years or so. I think I first started using Moodle in 2006. I blog when I find the time, but since the two little ones have been around, I've struggled to find time to blog. But there should be some stuff coming on pretty soon. And I'm a developer, a very slow one, but I really enjoy this part of the whole Moodle experience. Now, so those are my experiences, but again, to put things in context, these are the places that I've worked at or lived in. So I was born and raised in France, left when I was 22, I think. I studied in France. I studied in marketing and IT, which was kind of a weird combination. And the idea was to teach us to be entrepreneurs. So that with varying degree of success, I suppose. I moved to the UK, where I worked as a language assistant, and this is really when I fell in love with education. I'm not one of those who's like a born educator. I really fell in love with education later on in life, and I think for the right reasons, but it was really a vocation that I discovered later on in life. After working in the UK for 3 or 4 years, I moved to Sydney for a year, and this is where I discovered Moodle. So I did some relief teaching in all sorts of schools, public, private, faith, non-faith, everything in between. So I really got a good idea of what schools could be like outside of a sort of a system that I was used to, that I went through as a kid and then worked at as a teacher. After Australia, I went back to the UK for about 2 months. But by then we'd been bitten by the travel bug, my wife and I. So we decided to leave again, and we went to work in Bangkok, in Thailand. We worked in an international school that catered for the expat population, with about 40 different nationalities, I think. So it was completely different once again, completely different context culturally, in terms of programs that were being taught as well. It was completely different. Stayed there for a while. I was a VLE coordinator, and this is where really, this was my first position where I did change. I brought change to the workplace. After Bangkok, we left for Hong Kong. So Hong Kong, we worked at a local school which taught the international baccalaureate. So we taught the sort of the international section at the school. Again, it was a sort of a semi-private school. And again, a lot of things I learned there on many fronts. And my role was a bit broader over there. So I looked after Moodle, but I was in charge of a change on a more on a broader sense. So looking at systems and how we can integrate technology in lessons and so forth. Then baby number one came along, so we thought it'd be a good idea to get closer to home. So we went to Germany for a couple of years. Worked at a wonderful school over there, again, international baccalaureate school aimed at the expat population. A really lovely school, great educators, and there I was again in charge of bringing change to the school, to the workplace. That was the first school for a while that I had worked at that did not have Moodle. So I was the managed back coordinator there. So it was really there was a big learning curve for me to go back to a school that did not use Moodle. I stayed there. Baby number two came along, and we thought that it was time for us to come back here, and we're back in Hong Kong now. So I work at a school called the Independent Schools Foundation in Hong Kong, which is a private independent school, and again, an international baccalaureate school. And here I'm in charge. My title is Educational Technology Project Developer. I think it's the world's longest title. And again, I'm in charge of working closely with the EdTech director, how we implement change and through systems such as Moodle, for example. So this may be very different from what your experience has been like, but I thought it'd be important for you to understand where I come from when it comes to change. Okay. So this was my first sort of the question I asked myself when I first started introducing Moodle about 10 years ago. How hard can it be? It doesn't look that difficult. All you need is a computer, right? And you just put it on and everybody's happy. Well, turns out that some people tend to be resistant to change. And the cynic in me might have thought, well, maybe they're just being lazy. They don't want change because they're being lazy. And the more balanced part of me just thought, okay, well, they might actually have very good reasons to why they are against change. There might be a portion of the school population who's for change, but there might also be part of the school population that is not for change. So what could be the reasons why they're against change? Well, let's go back one, actually, and let's pretend for a minute that we're in a world where money and resources don't matter because we have them, okay? In reality, that doesn't happen, but let's pretend that we've overcome those hurdles and we've got the money and we've got the equipment and we've got the resources that we need. So why would we not want change? There could be many things. Teachers or members of staff might be anxious at the introduction of a new system, learning something new. Not everybody is up for it. Not everybody cares about learning new things. Some people feel that they have very good grasp of what they're doing of their trade, and they don't specifically want to learn something new, but it might make them anxious to learn something new because they haven't had the need to learn anything new for a little while. So there might be anxiety there. There might be a fear of failure. It can hurt to not be able to do something when all of your colleagues are able to do something. And there is such a thing as computer anxiety and a fear of failure. There's research showing that this is still around. It could be as simple, well, as complicated as having a difficult home life, and this has an impact on someone's performance at work, and their brain is just too busy to be thinking about something new, yet another thing. It could be that they have many children at home. It could be that someone is not doing so well. There are many different factors why people might not be up for change. This is a side that's slightly more interesting to me. This is something I discovered that you may have discovered a while ago, but there may be people who have vested interest in other projects and they want you to trip up when you try to implement change. It could be that they want system X to be put in place instead of system Y, or I'm talking systems, but it could be something else. It could be a policy to be implemented, for example. And here we're going into the darker sides of politics, things that really you can't plan for when you're trying to implement change. These things might only, come out of the woodwork when you've already started. So that's it may be something that I've come up with in the past. It could be personal grievance. It could be that someone or a group of people have beef with the organization that you're working for. It could be that they don't like you very much. As much as I'm trying to be a nice guy, not everybody will like me. And in fact, there might be people who really dislike me. Even though we're trying to be professional at all times, schools are a people's thing. And again, I'm looking at this through my lens, which is schools, K-12 schools. I've seen personal grievances get in the way of projects being implemented successfully. Something to keep in mind, really. Envy. It could be that there is someone in your school who is envious of your position and is going to try and do something to trip you up once again because they want your job. Luckily, I've not had this yet, but I know of some friends who that happened to. So that's something to keep in mind when we implement new things. Keep your enemies close. Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. It might be a good idea to find out who is envious of you, if at all possible. It could be just simply that people are overworked. We see it time and time again in newspapers, on websites, on social media, teachers being worked to the bone. It could be that there just is no space, there is no time. Time is our currency. It could be that there is no time left for anything new. And this is a really difficult situation to deal with, because on paper, it might look like everybody is doing what they're supposed to do, which is to teach their timetable, teach their classes, do their marking, and so forth. But in reality, often there are things that don't quite show up in the timetable and are not counted in the minutes, as it were, quote unquote, of the teaching minutes of a teacher over a cycle. And it could be that this is a problem. Could be that the people you're trying to implement change with have a lack of prospects in the school. It could be that the structure of the school means that they've reached a certain level, and no matter what they do, they will never progress their career in that particular school. And it might be that they're lacking that sort of motivation because the prospects aren't there. Lack of reward. Some people want to do new things, and if they're not provided with time to do those new things, they say, well, okay, if I don't have time, then can I have a stipend? Can I have extra if you want me to be involved in a certain way that other people, like to an extent that other people are not? Perhaps I need some sort of reward. It could be that the reward is not perceived to be enough, either the financial reward or the professional reward. This one is interesting, and that's something I've encountered in my career. It could be that some individuals do not particularly oppose to what you want to do, but some of their friends do, and they do so very vocally. And it could be that that person who doesn't really care cares a lot more about their friendship with that person who cares a lot. And there is a chance that the person who doesn't care so much will side with their friends and become vocal on an issue that perhaps they didn't really care about. Again, this may sound a little bit like playground behavior, but it is something that I have noticed, and that I've come across in my career, and it is something to keep in mind. Again, it very much depends on the organization. This would not happen in some organizations. It may happen in others. It could be that there's a belief that the project that you're trying to implement is bad for the organizations, bad for parents, bad for students, bad for the rest of the community. There are a lot of educators I've worked with. I would say the vast majority of educators I've worked with have been very dedicated, very passionate about what they do. And they feel very strongly about things that we put in place. And unless they see a value, an educational value, or something that is going to make the students learn better, or the community gel better together, or at least get some sort of a gain, then they will be very much against the project. It could be that they've been burnt in the past. I remember, in the early 2000s, and even before that, as a student, I remember technology companies saying that technology is going to cure all your problems, and some people have just got bored of this and realized that actually it doesn't. It doesn't. Good pedagogy will help, and technology alone will help with that, but it's not the key to all of the problems, and. It is harder to convince someone who's been quote unquote burnt in the past by those things, etc. We could spend all day talking about those things, but those are some reasons that are valid reasons why people would be against change. But there is more. And again, this is a broad statement, but schools are extremely complex organizations. On the surface, they look very simple. But if you start thinking about it, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of processes at any given school. Anything from the attendance to, say, a student referral for something, keeping track of scores, keeping track of visits at the medical office, all those things. Everything has a process, has a procedure attached to it. And there are so many moving pieces in schools. They're very, very complex. So that's another part of why it is difficult to implement change. So we have the personal element, and we have the organizational element that makes it complicated. Here is a quick example. Names. Names is a really interesting thing. So I'm working on a database at the minute and working in Hong Kong. I've got some students who have names in English and Chinese. They have multiple names. And let's pretend that we have little Jimmy. Now, in most schools, we look at name and we go, okay, so we have a first name, a middle name. Some students have a middle name, and then we have a last name, right? Okay, well, little Jimmy comes along. And little Jimmy is the son of someone who's extremely wealthy and extremely famous, and he's at risk of kidnapping, for example. Well, we might not want to keep little Jimmy and have his real records in the database. We might want to alias that student. And this is something that happens in some schools. So what do we do then? Well, it could be that a paper version is just fine, or it could be that actually, no, we need a special system for that one child. And you, I don't know if you've seen this cartoon before, but you end up creating overly complicated systems, to cater for edge cases. So schools can be extremely complicated, and that's just one example. There are so many processes that don't quite fit the procedure in place. Then we have data. An estimate, and this is a fairly low estimate that I've calculated, shows that we have about 2,000 plus pieces of usable data on each student. And those pieces of data are created each academic year on one system. So we're looking at attendance data, we're looking at grades in the grade book, we're looking at demographics, we're looking at things like transportation, you name it. Those are pieces of data that are important. They have a direct impact on teaching and learning. Attendance, we need to know about attendance. We need to know whether a child is indeed at school. So if we look at this, if we look at the pieces of data we have, and we say we have a K-12 or any school that has 1,000 students in it, and those students stay for 15 years. Now, I'm not really awesome at math, but I believe that over a 15-year period, you end up with 30 million pieces of data. So we have the personal aspect that makes change difficult. We have the organizational aspect of a school that makes it very difficult to implement change. And we have a lot of extremely valuable and important data there. So we're starting to grasp why change can be very difficult to implement at school. And to make it even harder, schools, unfortunately, are in a constant state of change. You would think that because of the reasons that we mentioned a few seconds ago, you would think that change wouldn't happen very often. But the truth is, decisions at the local, at the national level, for public schools might mean that we need to change programs, we need to change the way we assess, we need to change the way that we do things in general. And those changes have a profound impact on what we do. So those are changes that are mandated by a higher authority. It makes it very difficult for someone like myself, or like, depending on your position, like yourself, to go and implement yet another change. So this then becomes very interesting. We have all of those variables, and then we have more things that I've not even mentioned. For example, new management that comes into the school, a new board that's been appointed, and they want to take the school in a different direction, for example. So we have so many different variables. So, this is very broad, but here we're here to talk about Moodle, right? So you're probably bored of what I'm saying, but I just wanted to paint the picture, so to put things into context. And now I'd like to talk about what I've done in the past. One thing I'd like to talk about very quickly is how dedicated the Moodle community is. It is the kindest community I've ever been part of. It's full of absolutely dedicated educators, and not just educators, just people of all sorts of walks of life who put their hearts into what they're doing. So we have all of the variables that we talked about earlier on, and we have, I believe, well, that's definitely the case for me, there is an emotional level that is not usually involved with other projects. I'll talk about the lessons learned with some of the projects I've done in the past. For example, introducing Moodle in 2007 at the school in Bangkok. The first time I introduced that to staff, actually to friends, the responses were quite cutting, and I wouldn't have cared if it had been for something like, introducing Microsoft Word. It wouldn't have hurt me, but for some reason I got a little bit upset on a personal level. Maybe it's because I was younger at the time, I'm not sure. But I would get things like, oh, what's Noodle again? Now, obviously, I put that as a joke because I'm sure some of you have had that in the past, and you wonder to what extent people have heard you, have listened to you. But on a more serious note, let's take a look at some of the quotes that people might use. And by people, I mean teachers, students, or parents, for example, or people in management, when you try and implement change and say, introduce Moodle in a particular instance. And let's take a look at some of the subtext of what those things mean. One of the first questions that I was asked, well, what happens if I don't use it? Now, there are two ways to read this. It's like, well, I don't want to use it. That could be one. Or it could be, do you know what? I'm actually quite concerned that I won't have time to use it. And I really don't want to get in trouble if I don't. And again, we go back to the anxieties that we talked about earlier on. Another thing, how will I learn it? Again, here it's like, well, do you know what? I actually want to learn. I'm not against it, but where will I find the time to do it? What resources are available? Can I come talk to you? What if you're not around? What's going to happen? So again, we go back to the anxieties, or maybe here it's anxious to learn in a positive way. There are many ways of reading this, but this is a question that comes that came often. Will I get extra time to work on this? This is This is an interesting question, and that's part of the mistakes that I made when I first implemented Moodle. We do need time. We do need a lot of time. And here again, it's like, look, I'm overworked, mate. I can't do this. Are you going to help me out? Is someone going to help me out? Am I going to get cover, substitute to teach my kids while I do this, or will I get some time off? What's going to happen? when I first introduced Moodle, it was still Moodle 1 point something. I can't remember which one it was, and the out of the box theme wasn't the prettiest at the time, and there was no subtext on that one, I don't think. Will there be minimum expectations? Again, the cynical could think, well, this teacher doesn't want to do anything, but it could be that this teacher doesn't want to get in trouble and wants to make sure that within the limited amount of time he has or she has, he or she can do the work that is required. Will I be appraised on my use of it? Again, that goes back to anxieties. I'm a teacher. I'm not very comfortable with the use of technology in general. Will I be appraised? And another thing could be, well, the person who appraises me, will they know what is good use of technology? What's the appraisal here? Like, do we want to make sure that there are links, for example, on my Moodle page? Are they going to check how many times my students log in? Those sorts of things. Will it improve students' grades? That was the first ever question I got. And obviously, that was an interesting one to answer. But here we have a dedicated educator who's like, I've been in the business for a long time. I know how to get my students the absolute best grades that I can get. And, there is no simple answer to this one. But again, the cynic in me could have thought, well, clearly this teacher doesn't want it. No, that's not the question that's being asked. Is will it improve and to what extent? So this is quite interesting. Has it been around a while? Again, that's going back to the burnt. I've been burned before. I've dedicated all my time to the system, and the company that I created just died. It's difficult to sell if the system's only been around for a couple of years. Luckily, even by then, Moodle had been around for a while. Will you be spying on me? That's a question that I got from a student, and that broke my heart when I heard that question. That goes back to, okay, as an organization, what are the values that you have? You go back to your school motto and make sure that the policies you have in place for the project that you're trying to implement reflect that. Will it help keep me organized? Again, from students, I'm going to have to go a little bit faster with these. Would I see the homework? That's from parents. Can I track my kids? Again, you could think, oh, well, that's a bit of a weird question from parents, but actually it could be that parents just want to have a quick look at what's going on. These are from management, usually. How much will it cost? Subtext, will I save money? Will it reduce printing? Subtext, can I have stricter limits on printing credits? Is it easy to learn? Subtext, will I spend a lot of money on professional development? Those are quite interesting. So some of the mistakes I made the first time I introduced Moodle, I didn't fully appreciate the impact on the community. Let me explain to you briefly what I mean by this. When you implement a system, the technology might sound awesome. Oh, look, you can share grades with the parents. Oh, look, the parents can see the attendance. But actually, this can have a really negative impact on the school, on the organization, or even on specific teachers or on the student. If we don't educate our parents as to what it means, as to what one grade means, as to, okay, well, the attendance may not have been taken properly by one of the teachers, so you don't, maybe the teacher was away on that particular day and it's someone else who took the attendance. So yes, your child shows up as he was away during that lesson, but actually he was there. Yes, your child did not perform very well at a test, but it doesn't mean that now he has to do 4 hours of homework a day. Until we educate parents, I'm not saying that we've got to hold off on the data, but it might be a good idea to talk to the community. So I didn't really appreciate the impact that this would have on the community, on the school. So as I said, I had a parent once come up to me saying, well, Mr. X, he uses Moodle all the time, and Mr. Y doesn't use Moodle at all. So you guys, you obviously can't look after your teachers very well. Like what else should I worry about? So that was quite interesting. I don't think I communicated the plan changes well enough, and that's something that I resolved later on. I should have lobbied hard enough to get PD time. We had some, it wasn't enough. It was group PD time. It wasn't excellent. So if I had to go back, I would lobby for a lot more professional development. That's what it stands for, PD time. I should have lobbied for expectations for teachers to do something with Moodle, so that issue of use not use in that particular workplace. Again, this might not be valid for other schools, but at that particular school, I should have had expectations on teachers just so that parents would have understood better what was going on, and that was a mistake. I didn't say no enough to people. When it took off, I started doing a few customizations, and then people were, oh, that's awesome. So you can do this. Can you do this? And because I was excited and I was still young at the time, I could get by with only a few hours sleep a night. I said, yeah, sure. The maintenance headache that I created for myself was quite something. And when I coded, I didn't follow the guidelines. I wasn't good enough at the time, but I was still excited and I could hack at it, so I did. But when it was time to refactor the code, it took Keith, my replacement, bless him, a long time to fix all the mistakes that I'd made. The things that I think actually worked, free cookies and tea. Those were great for PD sessions that were voluntary. So if you can get a little bit of budget, if you've got a bit of catering budget, or even just go and get cheap cookies and tea, and that works. Sounds silly, but I can see that this has worked for you guys as well. I found an in. I found a way for teachers to log into Moodle after a while, not at the beginning, but after a while. I found a way for teachers to log into Moodle every day, multiple times a day. And the first thing was the attendance. The attendance was still taken on paper at the time. Our attendance was very simple, but it took the office a long time to put lists together and contact parents and so on. So I just did, if you want to go on my website, you can see what I did. So I did an attendance thing, and then I did a credit system, which was kind of a merit system. And that meant that teachers would log into Moodle every single day. So even though there were no expectations at the time, they got used to using the system. And now, like 7 years on or 8 years on, Moodle is used for pretty much everything at the school. So that the development has continued, and it's really cool. So I'm really happy to see what those guys have done. And Keith, who's my replacement over there, has done a fantastic job. And I wish he'd presented at this iMoot, but I don't think he could find the time. Some customizations, as I said. Okay, so that was my first project. My second project in another school was to relaunch Moodle. And in a lot of ways, I found this a lot harder because there was something and people had been very disappointed with it because it hadn't been maintained properly. There was no one to look after it. There was no one that teachers could turn to for help. Basically, it was like, hey, here is a system, use it or don't, do what you want, but it's there. And it made it very, very difficult. I came to the school and I would have people tell me it doesn't do X or Y. And I'd be like, well, actually, it does. But it's just that you've not been taught how to do it. You've not been shown how to do it. So it was really, really difficult. Then I had teachers telling me, well, that system didn't work. So I've put all my stuff on, you name it, something else like Google or whatever. And it made it very, very difficult because there was at that time a desire from management to reboot Moodle. So that made it a little bit tricky. You get teachers telling you they don't like to work that way and so forth. So here are some mistakes I made. This feels good. It feels like going to a psychologist and talk about all the bad things that you've done in your life. This was interesting. So the relaunch was in Moodle. In Hong Kong. As rumor has it, students in Hong Kong work extremely hard. They work very long hours, and this is true. This is not just a myth. And it got to the point that in good conscience, I couldn't leave Moodle on at night. I really genuinely thought of switching Moodle off at past a certain time. We'd have a significant amount of kids handing in work. I mean, late. I mean, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. After they'd been to tutoring lessons and so forth. After a lot of discussions, we decided not to. But even though we had taught students, okay, this is not a good habit to do your homework at that time, there was still a number of students. Luckily, that number of students dwindled, and in the end, we managed to talk to individual students. But I should have preempted that. So if you're in a part of the world where things are very competitive, you might want to look at your logs, your Moodle logs, just to see how late some of the students actually work. You might get a really bad surprise. So I did not fully appreciate the impact on the students. So as soon as we started putting feedback and things like that on Moodle, that was great for the students. They'd get good feedback that they could act upon, but the parents could also see it. And some parents are extremely demanding of their kids. I wouldn't say I was worried about some of our students' well-being, but that certainly had an impact on some of our students. So again, something to keep an eye on and to talk about with the parent community. I don't think I did well enough to get the appraisal system changed. Relaunching Moodle was part of a larger push that I was doing at the school to do with technology in general. And I think it would have been a great idea to have the appraisal system modified a little bit to showcase some of the great things that were being done at the school. And that's something I should have tried harder to modify at the time. I didn't communicate the bigger picture to staff. From one day to the next, they were told, okay, well, it would be a really good idea if you started to use Moodle. I'm not going to force it upon you, but really you should. And I don't think I spent enough time explaining to those teachers why we were doing it. What's the point of using Moodle over another system in the stack of systems that we had at the time? And that's something I've done at the current workplace, and I think it's paying dividends. So people actually understand. I believe most people understand what's going on, why we're doing what we're doing. What I think worked over there, and that was the first thing when people told me, well, Google does this and Moodle doesn't. So I started integrating systems with Moodle, just using the normal plugins, your Google Apps plugins, your Turnitin, your or whatever plagiarism system that you use, your VoiceThread, things like that. So Moodle became the platform, the sort of the launching platform, either through links, just simple links, single sign-on, or actual integration through embedding, through so like Turnitin, for example, through it's actually transparent to the user. They don't, they get taken to the right Turnitin class without realizing those sorts of things. So that worked really well. I really had a chat with all of the stakeholders, sat down with them, said, okay, what do you need? And that took time, but luckily I was afforded the time, and that helped a great deal. Just having a chat. It's a people's thing, isn't it? And here at the current school, I'm revamping and extending Moodle. So revamping, I'm changing the functionality of Moodle, changing the look of it to something that's easier to use for students. So we're going to start at the kindergarten level all the way to grade 12. We're going to have 3 themes. I say we have 3 themes. One for the really little ones, one's for the primary, and then one's for the secondary school, and then added a whole lot of features. Currently, we're with a hosting provider that does not allow us to add plugins, and a lot of teachers who've used Moodle in other schools are missing the extensibility and some of the plugins. Checklist, for example, is a plugin that we've not had the chance to use, and that's something that teachers really want. And extending at the moment, we're only using it in the secondary school. We want to use it in the primary and kindergarten as well. So this is the challenge this time. And these are some of the quotes that I've been given. But in the primary school, we use such and such instead, Weebly or whatever. So it's always interesting to say, okay, that, so what is it that you use in, say, Weebly for example? Can we replicate some of that in Moodle? Should we replicate some of that in Moodle? Or, yeah, we've already seen what you do, and now let us tell you why we think it's a good idea to move to this system, and talk about the full system stack and where we're going as a school, and most people understand. I've used such and such before, and it's way better. I've used, I don't know, Canvas, I've used Blackboard, I've used, you name another system, and it's way better. And that one is always interesting as well. The version of Moodle we have currently is good. It doesn't look great, but it is very functional. And it could be that when people say that something is better, is because it looks better. So that's that's what I found anywhere here. That a lot of it goes down to looks and not so much ability, which is quite interesting. So some of the mistakes I've made here, and I promise you this won't take long. Oh, I've made that many mistakes. I've got 2 slides. And I don't know what I've done here. Oh, okay. So I've communicated the bigger picture with the staff. And, I've got one of those weird looking Venn diagrams where you've got 16 different pies, one of each representing a system, and showing them, what we want to use the systems for. And this one is the most interesting chat that I've had with the colleagues. It's okay, so we have Moodle, we have Google Apps, for example. The amount of overlap is overwhelming for someone who is not really clear as to what the systems do. So, well, I can share stuff on Moodle, I can share stuff on Google, and so forth. So it's always a really good conversation to have and say, yeah, there is overlap, and this is what we, as an organization, this is what we've decided to use to do X, process X, and we're going to use that one to do process Y, and so forth. So to decide as a staff where things should go, and that's always an interesting conversation. Communicated the complexity of the school. Now, being on the contract here, I can't share some of the findings that I've discovered, but it is by far the most complex organization I've worked for. And when you start explaining to people, we can no longer support X number of systems, we're going to have to trim it down because we're at a point where we're going to collapse if we continue to do that. Again, if it's explained to members of staff, to the community, people tend to understand. So that's something I should have done when I started my career. And it's not always an easy conversation, but it's a very good one to have for sure. It's uncomfortable at times. And I did, and again, I was afforded the time, and I'm aware that not everybody could do that, but I had a great deal of time to talk to people, to look at how things are done at this workplace. Sorry, and this has paid dividends, and we're nearly there on migrating servers next week, and we're doing the proper launch in August. But I'm very excited about what's going to happen. And killing Moodle. That's not something I've had to do yet, but I know that some of you will be at this stage, either because other systems have taken over. Could be Google, could be Canvas, could be something else, and it could be that some organizations need to kill Moodle. Now, I've had to kill another system before. That was another system from Australia, but it was a commercial one. And it wasn't pretty because we had teachers who had dedicated hundreds of hours to that particular platform, and all of it was gone. And that was very, very uncomfortable. But it was a decision that needed to be made. Hopefully, I won't have to kill Moodle at any point. I like it too much, but that's something, if you've done it, if you've had to do it, or if you're in the process of doing it, or if you're thinking of doing it, I'd love to hear from you and, see whether there are, things that we can share, work together, or just to have a chat if you want as well. Because sometimes it's, as I said, there is that emotional aspect of things that I've not found in other products or other communities. Now, this concludes the presentation I had. I was given 45 minutes. I've used up all the time, but I'd love to stay around and take questions or comments, or if you've disagreed strongly with something. I'll go through the chat because I have to tell you the truth. I'm very bad at doing two things at once, so I've actually not looked at the chat at all. But I can take a look. But if you want to ask a question or say something, a comment, please feel free to do so. You can put up your hand, or maybe you can even take the microphone. I'm not quite sure how that works, or just in the comments. Up to you. I'm here, so let's have a chat if you want. I see some of the comments. It's it's interesting to see the Google Moodle thing. Yeah. Very true, Tabitha. Actually, when I worked in Germany, it was the Google thing. Actually, was very difficult because of the German, and more particularly, I was in Bavaria at the time. There was a lot against Google. Yeah. That's interesting, Dorian. When did that happen? Did that happen recently? The Google thing at your school? Last year. Okay. Yeah, that's so. Even though Moodle has been, I would say, succeeded in Thailand, I think the first school that I worked at in Hong Kong, the person who replaced me was not afforded enough time, I don't think. And again, the policy wasn't changed and so on. And I think Moodle is dying a death there. I think. Okay, Kenneth, that's interesting. And are you currently using both, or are you using one or the other? It is very sad, Dorian. I agree with you. Do you know, I'd love to give you guys the microphone, but the only the only thing I'm allowed to do is to kick you out of the presentation, which I don't think is very nice. Okay, Kenneth. Wow, that must be interesting. It must be very challenging for members of staff to understand what they need to do. Is it what you found, or are people just fine at times? Yeah. Canvas is an interesting product. I just don't. I just don't see what advantages it has over Moodle personally, other than it's different. But if Julian's around, I'm not sure if he's in the presentation. He's probably jumping on his seat right now. No, he's not there. Okay, Dorian, that's interesting. Again, that's so if you've got different departments using different system, it then becomes difficult for students. It becomes difficult for parents to understand where they need to go. Yeah, I'm with you, Kenneth. I think the look of Canvas by default is better, and I wonder to what extent people just like it. It's interesting. When I joined the school here recently in August, and I was baffled at the amount of people who just don't know about drag and drop. That but look at the other this other product. It's so much easier, like Google Drive or whatever, or oh look, this is so much easier. I can just drag and drop, and I'm like, yeah, you can also do it here. So really, it takes time, even in a place that had been using Moodle for a while, to work on this. I wonder to what extent we do disservice by not providing, staff members with the proper, the proper handholding that's needed to start using the system. Well, yeah, I can imagine, Kenneth. Yeah, it doesn't sound like a lot of fun, but yeah, it's interesting times, as you say. Mathieu, I'll switch on the microphone for you. You're on.
Thanks. A good presentation. I think some of the challenges related to why some prefer Canvas over Moodle or whatever. Well, I don't know how all schools do it with regard to setting up courses, but the need for standardization across courses for the sake of user experience is something that's real important, but often overlooked because everybody wants their freedom to customize their course. But in the end, you end up with what amounts to a fragmented system because of people moving blocks all over the place and these sorts of things. So I find a lot of the advantages that are claimed for, say, Canvas, for example, which has largely unified look, fall away when you standardize the design of your courses across an entire institution, which means there's a limitation to the freedom of your faculty, but it's important for the sake of user experience to ensure that every time someone goes into a different course, they're not greeted with a completely different layout that is jarring in the user experience.
Yeah, I think you're making a great point, Mathieu, for sure. That is something that actually, when I first started using Moodle, or maybe not first, but a while back, I was surprised that you could get course themes. And it's like you jump in from one system to another. As a new user, you're like, oh my God, I've just clicked on something. I've just broken something. So you're making an excellent point. And yeah, I mean, preparing courses and classes for teachers, really important. Christina also is making a great point about the legacy code in Moodle. Although, having said that, I agree with you. But having said that, people like Lewis, I'm not sure whether he's been on yet, Lewis Carr, he's done some awesome work in terms of theming. And I mean, you wouldn't know you're on Moodle with some of the stuff he's done. It's pretty amazing stuff. So if his presentation hasn't been yet, and I'm sorry, I've been so busy with work, I've not even been able to attend any yet, but I highly recommend just seeing some of the stuff he's done. It's great work. So I think we're running out of time.
Frederic,
yeah.
I'd just like to take the opportunity now to butt in before you and your followers continue. Thank you very much for the very insightful confessions of a Moodler, I would have titled it. It was very good. And you opened your heart to everybody. That's really good. But thank you very much for being part of iMoot 2016. And I'll stop the recording now, but you're welcome to continue the discussion in the session.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot,